All right, welcome everyone to our E4L webinar. Fantastic to be here tonight, not just with myself from our E4L team, but we also have Dr. Pauline Ho, and we're very pleased to have a very special guest tonight, which is Dr. Catherine Dix, coming from us from the ACER office in Adelaide this evening. Now, this is work that we're presenting tonight has been going since 2016, and it's work where ACER led an evaluation looking at the impact of thinking maths results on students' learning outcomes. We have the Associate Director who led this work here tonight, Dr. Pauline Ho, and we also have a brand new Associate Director joining us tonight on her very first day in the role, full-time, Susanna Schofield, as well on the chat box tonight. So we've got 3 Associate Directors, and we have 1 Senior Research Fellow from ACER. So Catherine Dix's formal role is Senior Research Fellow in the Education and Monitoring and Research at ACER, which she's worked from since 2017 and brings an extensive amount of evaluative expertise. So we're very pleased to have Catherine here with us tonight, and also to have you all here joining us from across Australia, because we know we had registrations from everyone. So as we start off, if you guys want to type into the chat box, let us know where you're joining us from here tonight. So let us know your role at your school, and also let us know where you're coming from. All right, so teacher, for example, Victoria. Fantastic. Thank you. Maths teacher from ACT. Awesome. Thank you. Fantastic. Great. Yes. And let us know. Oh, fantastic. Great to have you all here. All right. And you're all letting us know that we're meeting on lands all across Australia. I'll do an introduction and acknowledgement of country from Melbourne, which is where Pauline and I are sitting tonight. So we're very grateful to acknowledge and pay our respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and the traditional custodians of this land in which we meet, and pay our respects to elders past, present, future and emerging. Oh, fantastic. We've got people from all over Australia joining us tonight. It's pretty lovely. Great. How fantastic.
And a wide range of roles as well.
Wide range of roles. We've got leaders, we've got teachers. Thank you. And a parent. I'm a parent too. High five. High five to the parent. How old's your child? Just of interest, parent?
Sally.
Sally. If you'd like to let us know. It's all right if you don't. Oh, awesome. Such a great age. I have an 11-year-old, Pauline.
Have a very grown-up kid.
Yeah, very grown-up kid.
Let's put it there.
All right. Grown-up kid. So we're parents as well. So thank you for joining us tonight.
So I'm sure everyone has heard of Metacognition, and I think we have been using it in our classroom. So it's nothing really new, but we really want to just dive deeper into what these strategies are and how it's implemented in the classroom. So this is a chance for us to really discuss together as a profession and learn more about it. So we have 4 key outcomes from this webinar. And if I sound really husky today, it's because I'm having a bit of a sore throat and it's not my usual voice, but let's take it as my usual voice because Tanya is saying it sounds better.
I think it sounds fantastic. Right?
Fantastic.
We'll give you a head cold every time you do a webinar.
Thank you. So we want to learn about some high impact metacognitive strategies that are effective in practice. And I thought it'd be really useful to talk about what it means as a whole school strategy, not only in the classroom, but also taking on the whole school strategy. And I can see some principals and school leaders in the chat box already. And so this would be really useful to help plan around a metacognitive strategy. And also having practical strategies to help students plan, monitor, and evaluate learning. And understanding how all these come in combination, because metacognitive is not an isolated learning strategy. It needs to put into a different package of different strategies to make it effective in the classroom.
It certainly does. And last session we covered off on feedback. So this is another one of those very highly effective approaches that we know that is quite it doesn't cost a lot to implement. It takes our intelligence as teachers and our intelligence as leaders. But we have that because we are a thoughtful and intelligent profession. So what would be, there's really no point in us doing an E4L webinar without a quiz at this point. And we all know you love your quizzes on a Tuesday night when you've been teaching all day and it's towards the end of term. So what we're going to do, we're going to launch straight into our quiz, which I'll bring up for you.
There's someone from Ceci.
Ah, welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome. We have, we're very fortunate to have Jenny Donovan,
Dr. Jenny Donovan.
Dr. Jenny Donovan, as a close critical friend of this organisation, leads up our research and evaluation panel.
She has a critical lens over all evaluations.
She does. Yeah. So I've got the questions up on the screen as well as in your poll in front of you. So you've now got those questions in front of you. So please feel free to start putting in your answers. Great. Fantastic. So the first question being randomised controlled trials. And we love randomised controlled trials, to say the truth here, and Catherine does too. I can see a big smile on Catherine's face whenever she hears the term randomised controlled trial, because it's just such a lovely phrase. And we also know the complexity behind it and the extreme expertise that it takes to run one. We're very fortunate to have such expertise in Australia. Very fortunate to be partnered with ACR on this project. All right, we've also had professional learning that focus on pedagogy alone. How students learn is seen to be less effective on students' outcomes. We have metacognition needs to be taught explicitly to help students develop thinking skills, and we have students cannot be taught metacognition, rather is found within the innate ability of the student. We've thrown some tricky ones in there for you tonight just to keep you on your toes, because depending on different time frames, we're at 6 o'clock here in Melbourne, you're at 4:30 in Perth. In Adelaide, what time are we at, Catherine? I'm just throwing to you live and being spontaneous.
Yeah, I know, throwing me. What is it? Hold up. 5:37. 5:37.
Oh, I like the accuracy. What I like is the accuracy of that response. 37. Wasn't 30, it's 37. Beautiful. All right, great. So let's go with the answers for the first one. And thank you to all of you who have voted. We're up at about 57% that have voted, which is fantastic. We've actually got a really great response rate of people attending tonight. So thanks for all taking out your time to learn more about metacognition tonight. So first answer is false, no, and especially in this trial and in the trials that we do run, we always run qualitative analysis as well.
Yeah.
What we would call
process evaluation.
Thank you, Pauline.
It's a big part of the whole randomized controlled trial. So we have impact evaluation, which is kind of a triangulated, it's a quantitative analysis, the impact evaluation, and it marries with the qualitative findings from the process evaluation to triangulate the findings about not just what works, but how and why it works.
Exactly, because we're not going to find out how and why by the numbers. I personally love numbers, I've always worked with numbers, but I have also done case studies as well. So really important to find out the how and the why, and we found that out by talking to educators, and we'll always find it out that way. So we always do that with our randomised controlled trials. All right, professional learning that focuses in on pedagogy alone, how students are likely to learn, is seen to be less effective on students' outcomes. So this one is,
it's a bit of a tricky
one. I find it a bit tricky. The wording's a bit tricky, so don't feel bad. And remember also that if we get something wrong, that leads to confusion, and confusion leads to learning. So it's all fabulous, okay? So we've got pretty even spread between true and false. It is a false. Oh, have we changed the wording around?
Which one? Oh, so I can explain that. So pedagogy.
I'm going to throw to Pauline.
Pedagogy is the skill of teaching. So you actually translate, translate the content into strategies that are digestible for students to understand. That is teaching strategies. But I think more than that, we need learning strategies, and that's why we are onto Metacognition. It's one of the learning strategy tools that students could use to, and when it's really done in combination with effective pedagogical skills can be really powerful.
Yes, so a combination of the two is more effective.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's right. Yeah.
All right, beautiful. Metacognition needs to be taught explicitly to help students develop thinking skills. I think you all pretty much had this. We got 88% that thought that was true. Yes, definitely. We need to teach it as a skill. Students won't pick this up by osmosis. I'm a biology teacher, so words like that I love. We need to explicitly teach it. That was the main area that Thinking Maths really focused in on. And we'll be going through how you can practically teach these skills in your classroom today. All right, so students cannot be taught metacognition, rather is found within the innate ability of the student. Most of you got this at 94% for a false. No, that is not true. We can teach it, and we do teach it, and we want to teach it.
Yes, it needs to be taught explicitly. And also, at the end of the day, students become used to and familiar with the process, and that's where it becomes more embedded into their thinking process.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Pauline. So just sharing the polling results with you there. So you should be able to see those up on your screen. Thank you very much. All right, so I'm really making you do all the work at the front end tonight. What I would love to hear from you is how you would define metacognition and self-regulation tonight, and do you think that they're helpful skills for students? And don't be shy, type them into the chat box. For everyone, if you'd like to as well, if you'd prefer just to share them with us, you can type them to just ourselves as well. So there's a button you can send them to all panelists or all panelists and attendees. So up to you which way you send them in, but do send them in and we'll start reading out from them. We've always had extremely intelligent insights from people attending. Thinking about thinking, fantastic. Great, very much so, isn't it? It's really about breaking down what are the thinking processes involved, and that can be modelled by the teacher taking through. So for example, maths problem on the board, why they picking a particular strategy. Great, identifying your thoughts, fantastic. Yes, and awareness of how you think or how our students think.
I love that both teacher and students' thinking is incorporated into the answer.
Me too. That's lovely. Oh, yeah, delaying gratification.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that so important for life? Yes. Well. Oh, it was just, fantastic. Great. So thinking, helping the students be aware of their thinking and how it's changing, managing impulses, very much so, and that's very much so around the self-regulatory aspect. Yes, emotional intelligence. Yes, thinking, and I like this one, is the emotional intelligence skills to reflect on one's thinking and strategies to one uses to problem solve. Fantastic. Process and strategies connected with thinking. Identifying how and why we do anything during learning. Great. Reflecting on your own thinking. Beautiful. Yep. Children knowing about their own successful learning strategies. And it's about having teachers providing students with a suite of different strategies that they can choose from. And the hard bit, I think, with metacognition is teaching, helping the students to recognise what strategy is best in what circumstance. And that's really intricate and lovely, especially in mathematics. Just thinking back to myself doing advanced mathematics and how much I loved it. Organising thinking, fantastic. Self-regulation, the ability to self-motivate, self-manage, self-modify and self-monitor their learning. Thank you. Yep, an intertwined network of knowing about and regulating our thinking. Thank you, lovely. Right, thinking about thinking is always useful when you have self-management. Sorry, Kat sitting on screen. Had to read that out because that was just awesome.
Yeah, I'm a cat.
And now I understand why my colleagues started giggling because the cat. That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's good. We haven't got a cat here, so we're going to be all right. Yes. Helps because it helps learners to be highly capable as learners. It does. It helps them not to be, it helps them with complex problem solving, and that's really one of the key issues that we are going to face and are facing right now within this generation. And you really, in order to do that, you need a high metacognitive ability and high self-regulation. Yeah, fantastic answers. Thank you everyone tonight. I like a description from, and Pauline's about to launch into some of her own descriptions, but I like one as Sir Kevin Collins described it as getting a helicopter and flying above the learning and seeing the peaks and the troughs. And I like that just as an overarching statement. I thought, oh, Sir Kevin, that's okay. That's probably why you got the knighthood.
That's right.
In education was right there. That's lovely. So enough from Sir Kevin. Me quoting Sir Kevin, we'll move on to Pauline.
Perfect. Thanks, Tanya. So I think everyone has given really good nuances around what metacognition is. I love those responses.
They were beautiful
really
responses.
Beautiful responses.
Pat yourselves on the back.
Exactly. So thinking about thinking is one of the most simplest way to describe and define metacognition, but it really has its roots in developmental psychology. So American psychologist John Flanville is the guru behind this work. So he has defined it as one's knowledge concerning one's own cognitive processes or anything related to them. For example, I am engaging in metacognition. If I notice that I am having more trouble learning, A, then B. If it strikes me that I double check C before accepting it as fact. So it's really double checking and having prompts along the way to probe your own thinking and seeing if that's correct, or are you on the right path, or do you need to change and improve your thinking, your responses, and that needs teachers to get involved in facilitating that thinking. So metacognition and self-regulation approaches aim to help students learn about their own learning. It's all about helping students take control of their learning, and we want that, isn't it? We don't want teachers to stand in front and say, teacher directed, and expect the students to do what the teachers want, but we want them to know and own their own learning, and so they know where they're heading, how they're doing, and this really is lifelong learning.
It is, and it's more engaging too, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If we give them metacognitive control to our students and allow them to engage with the task after we've taught them explicitly the different strategies, and then they can choose which one to use. That's far more engaging.
Absolutely. So the three key ways we could do that is through planning, monitoring, and evaluating learning. And there'll be more, we'll be discussing more of these strategies around these three areas. For teaching, because I always like to put into practical terms, so what does it really mean for teaching? Is by helping students to become more aware of our thought processes and encouraging them to think through the problem using a range of strategies. And this requires them to, teachers to think about the culture of teaching and learning in your classroom, because sometimes we might, the environment might be a barrier to this kind of learning, or even encouraging, like students being afraid to speak out. So we need to have that kind of culture to encourage them to do so and to speak up and talk about their learning. So
we really need that culture of high trust.
Absolutely.
As a base for everything, don't we? And we know that that's incredibly important for feedback as well. Well, it's important for everything in life, isn't it?
Absolutely.
In our workplaces, everywhere.
So the three key components to metacognition, and that is one, cognition, which is the mental process in knowing, understanding, and learning a subject. Like we all know how we will work a problem sum. For example, 155 plus 300, we have a certain formula and a certain way of approaching that sum, but learning stops there if you do not have metacognition, because you just do that technique and you used it to sort of provide the answer to that, but you're not thinking through how you actually did it. And if you're given a more challenging sum, let's say a very long problem sum, the student will be having difficulty to try to match different strategies into one to accomplish that task. So it's all about practice and sustaining that kind of consistent practice in classroom to allow students to get used to that kind of questioning, like why am I using these strategies versus that? How am I going? How am I progressing? And teachers just facilitating that process is really important. And the third one, which is not really common, is motivation. And in most of the literature, people drop that off, but actually it's really important because students, as you mentioned just now, Tanya, students need to be engaged in the process, to feel comfortable in being able to talk about their thinking and their learning.
Yeah, no, and motivation is crucial, isn't it? Motivation is really, it came up in the chat, didn't it? Delaying gratification, you know, is motivation really in a nutshell, is making sure that you do the difficult tasks now, so that you can progress through the other tasks later.
So I really love this quotation from OECD, sorry. So too often we teach students what to think, but not how to think. We get through our curriculum so quickly sometimes that we just want to rush through the content of what we need to finish, but not how to think. And that's one of the things that we were talking about in the whole school strategy. In order for this to happen in Metacognition, we really need to set aside time to think about adapting school culture and also structures as well, to allow maybe lesser content but more time in deeper thinking for it to allow that to happen.
Really good point there.
So this is a bit of just I love to display different content into different visual
You
modes.
really do. You really do, Pauline. You love it. You love a diagram.
This is called reinforced learning, right?
Yeah.
So so there are two levels to encouraging thinking in your classroom. The first level is you have the cognitive strategy to solve the problem, which we have talked about there. Like you have learning how to put a sum together and then using the right strategies to monitor it. And that's where we'll go into in the next few slides. So this is the other analogy that I was talking about. Instead of the helicopter, it's an orchestra because I'm a music teacher. So I really love to talk about music.
The music teacher, can you?
Absolutely. So it's really wonderful. You just imagine the orchestra is a learning orchestra. This is a learning orchestra. So the musicians are the cognitive tasks. So, and the conductor is the metacognitive strategy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
okay.
The conductor brings in the musicians, increase the tempo, brings chooses the piece of music, like how we select the different strategies in the classroom, and then knowing how to adapt the different sounds, play with the different instruments until you get a beautiful sound at the end of the day. Do you like my analogy?
I love your analogy. I love music, and I've evaluated programs in the arts, so I have a big passion for the arts.
Perfect.
So that has just worked spectacularly for me. That's lovely. I really like that analogy. I'm thinking like trumpets, bring the trumpets in as like a specific math strategy. I'm connecting it to maths. That's great. And then you bring in the saxophone. Well, orchestras don't so much have saxophones, but it could be a jazz trio as well. Piano. Cool. Love it. Love the analogy. So we know from the global evidence base as presented within the Teaching and Learning Toolkit here, we know that metacognition and self-regulation have an amazing impact when implemented successfully at the school level at a plus 7 months worth of learning. So this is an average of a meta-meta analysis, and we'll be looking at the variation that sits underneath that. The good news here too is that it has a really spectacular evidence security rating, which are those little padlocks that you see there. I heard Sir Kevin Collins call them handbags the other week too, so I kind of like that as well. But they're not handbags, it's a securities, they're padlocks. But the handbags is funny. And then we have a low average cost. And so it might be a bit of initial cost in upfront training of teachers around using metacognitive practices, bit more within their classroom, but a lot of it is just really as a teacher thinking explicitly when you're working something out on the board and taking the students through the thinking that is occurring within your head, which we'll be going through in a bit more detail exactly what happened in thinking maths that did generate the impact. So the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, as you know, is a live and dynamic resource. So meta-analytical studies are added to it every 12 months as a refresh on each strand. Okay, so here we're looking at the meta-analysis ratings and the overall mean weighted effect size of 0.62, which was in 2017. And this brought it to a plus 8 months of learning impact. And then what we saw in 2018, I love watching additional dots be added because that's a lovely large study that has met the selection criteria to be included in the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. So lovely that researchers are out there doing this high quality work. And what's happened is it's brought down the mean weighted effect size to 0.54 in 2008. And if you'd like to read more about that, I wrote an article specifically about looking at the changes in metacognition and self-regulation for Teacher Magazine, for ACR Teacher Magazine. So there's a link there. And we always send through the slides, and they're available on our website as well with clickable links to each of the articles. So what exactly does metacognition and self-regulation look like in the classroom? There's a lot of different strategies. I haven't included all of them here. Here's just a selection. My personal favourite isn't on here, which is hierarchical concept maps. So for all you science teachers out there, love that. But here's some excellent ones. And their associated effect sizes. So help seeking from peers, adults and teachers, which can be a tricky skill actually for students to develop, and we want them to develop help seeking ability because it's incredibly important, not just for their schooling, but for life as well. So that's an effect size of 0.6, keeping records, monitoring, rehearsing, memorizing, and we've also got goal setting and planning and self-monitoring. So these all have fairly large effect sizes that are equivalent to, that would be between 5 and 6 months worth of learning progress. So that are some practical strategies that you can use within your classroom. So Pauline and Catherine will be going through the research that was conducted by ACER, and Pauline acted as the evidence broker in that case. And what they did was a randomised controlled trial. So we can see here in the hierarchy of evidence that myself and Matt Diebel wrote in an article about, we can see that that's at a really high level of evidence. And it's the type of evidence that's useful for us to make our base decisions on. The level that we were just talking about a second ago, which is presented in the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, that's at the level even higher, which is a systematic review. So that's the clustering of multiple studies, and within each one of those studies are multiple studies. So that's sort of the highest level of evidence and is useful in informing evidence-informed decision-making. So just while we're doing this, what I would really love for everyone, and thank you. Yes. You've also got assets being added. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's great. Thanks for sharing. The chat's going quite well in our absence. Beautiful. I get distracted by the chat quite easily, but thank you for it. All right. And what I would love you all to do, if you're happy, is just to type in how many years you've been in education for into the chat box. While I'm just talking about evidence-informed decision-making. So really what we're talking about here is, oh, fantastic. So we've got 4, 15 years, 25 years, 21 years, 2 years, 29, 31, 34, 7, 40. Wow. 6, amazing. 30, and still loving learning. Oh, I want to give a high five. Oh, I love that. That's right. Teachers, we are lifelong learners. I'm still registered. I could pop into any classroom. In fact, I was in classrooms last week in Darwin working with students on evidence. But don't let me get off point. So we've got all this collective expertise running in this room. This virtual room with you here tonight. So we're saying take that expertise with you, take the years and years of teaching that you've done. We've both taught, we know what it's like within the classroom. We know the intensity of the classroom, especially at this time of year. So we're saying bring that and combine that with evidence, the evidence that we're presenting in the toolkit and the evidence that we're presenting tonight in the Learning Impact Fund. And it's really not about prescribing about what goes on from a position of unchallenged authority. That's from Professor Jonathan Sharples in the UK. We're really saying embrace that. Fantastic.
So we are onto effect sizes here, and effect sizes, while we are talking a bit about that, I don't really want to go really in depth into it, but why we are talking about this is because we are going to be, Catherine is going to be showing us some evidence from the Thinking Maths intervention evaluation, and it's a bit of knowledge around the size of this impact would be really important to understand that work. So if for some of you who may not understand what impact sizes are, it's just really just the difference, magnitude of difference between two groups, and usually it's an intervention group versus a control group, and it's really to talk about what additional learning is there for the student after the intervention has been put in place and evaluation. So just for some guidance around how big or small these effect sizes are, we're talking about a small effect size will be around 0.2, a medium would be 0.5, a large would be 0.8. But in educational research versus health research, we tend to find really small effect sizes, and that's because education is really complex. And as everyone would really agree, to really impact student outcomes takes a lot. And doesn't just have one strategy or just one intervention, but a combination of factors that come into play, and even families and communities as well, that impacts school outcomes. So we are definitely just seeing smaller effect sizes. And if we see something around 0.3 to 0.4, in John Hattie's term, that is pretty average. Okay, so in the next slide, okay, so we just want to say that effect sizes to us teachers really mean very little. What we want to talk about is months of additional progress, and that's why we at E4L translate all these effect sizes into months of progress. And what I mean by months of progress is really additional in terms of 1 year's growth. So if we expect the child to gain 12 months of learning, what's the additional months on top of 12 months that the child learns or gets after the intervention is being put in place? And so this, before we go into that, so based on, can see this one here? So we just want to say that 1 month of learning is actually just an effect size of 0.09, and that's because we divide one standard deviation divide by 12 months, and we get 0.09. In the next slides, we really invite Catherine to talk through the Thinking Maths program. And before we go into that, Thinking Maths program is really to give you a bit of introduction. It's a professional learning program, Maths professional learning program for teachers. Teachers attend 5 days of professional learning and go back to the classroom, translate those learning into practice. And it's really around metacognitive and questioning techniques. So Catherine, take it away.
Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to be here tonight, so thank you for having me. So I just wanted to come in with a bit of an oversight of the whole evaluation side of things. Essentially, there was this professional development program that was developed by the Department of Education in South Australia, and it's designed at this point in time for government schools in South Australia, and the focus of the program was on those middle school years. One important part of the program was around making sure that the transition from primary into secondary school was much more smoother, because in South Australia, our maths performance is nothing to be proud of, and we certainly saw that levelling off of achievement from students as they transitioned from primary to secondary. So, excuse me, what was some of the evidence that was coming out of what was happening was that there was a disconnect between what primary school teachers were doing around teaching maths and what secondary school teachers were doing around teaching maths. And actually, the differences in pedagogy and approach were having that impact on students to disrupt their connection between maths and their transition from one year to the next. So the program was designed around 5 professional learning days. So these were full days. In total, teachers received 30 hours of training. They were in a room mixed with primary and secondary teachers, so they had the opportunity to learn from each other. We were hoping to see, or the program was hoping to see more sort of content knowledge and confidence built in the primary school teachers, and that the secondary school teachers were more strongly using manipulatives and those sorts of concrete learning methods that they tend not to use in the secondary setting when it gets to that stage. There were 4 to 6 weeks breaks or gaps between the professional learning days, and that was when it was important that the teachers took their learnings from the day and tried to implement them back in the classroom. It was absolutely amazing. I got the opportunity to observe those trainings, and I saw teachers in tears as they experienced not only being the teacher and thinking about how they taught in their classroom, but also they sat there in the professional learning day and experienced it almost as the learner as well. So they had two hats on. And, you know, for some teachers, it literally was the first time they fully understood something in maths, which is a little bit concerning, but just amazing, you know, that this sort of program was hitting that need. The days themselves were designed around specific content knowledge. So that would be something like focusing on patterns and generalization. And it also had a pedagogical element. So that might focus on differentiating learning, you know, for example. The research informed strategies that were used in the program included establishing a culture of learning, encouraged metacognition and conceptual understanding through the use of effective questioning, engaging and challenging students in their learning, and promoting professional reflection and networking. And I'll unpack a few of those in a little while. But what's really important that participants during the professional learning, they were there to reflect not only on their own attitudes about maths, but also about their attitudes towards students and students' beliefs around mathematics. It was really important that they focused on the types and ways they were questioning students. So they had to reflect on the ways they were doing that and were there better ways of evoking question and curiosity in students around mathematics. They needed to focus on the level of student thinking required in their tasks. So were students really pushed to extend their learning, to challenge their thinking and to extend themselves in the tasks that they were being given? Or was it just, you know, here's another maths sheet with, you know, 20 questions of the same type, which, you know, as we know, is not very engaging for students. They're also asked whether the tasks had multiple entry and exit points, which is really picking up on that differentiated learning, and to think more deeply about whether that was targeting the students that they had in their class. And almost most importantly, what were they rewarding and valuing in their classroom? So these teachers were really being pushed on every front, right down to the terminology they were using. And you could just see the extension that through the professional development days gave the opportunity for them to see expert professional learning and teaching pedagogy in action. So Pauline Carter, the developer of the program, modelled the questioning, put teachers on the spot. Teachers were organised into tables, and a lot of the day was actually, you know, they were given problems to solve and they had to work through those problems. They had to make notes as they went. They had to monitor and their own thinking and learning around it, which was a big step for some teachers. They just wanted to arrive at the answer. It wasn't around the answer that was important. It was the process. And quite often, you know, problems would get left unanswered, which drove some people crazy. But the focus was much more about how the mathematical thinking was happening, and much less about, you know, what answer did you get. And so the modelling, the role modelling that was shown gave teachers a great opportunity to see, you know, pedagogy best practice and to start to think how they might implement those strategies in their own classroom. I've lost my hearing piece, it slips up. So, yeah, the facilitators, as I said, modelled those good questioning techniques and the pedagogical practice, and teachers took that evidence back to, or that learning back to the classroom and implemented it. And through that experience, there were also resources that were provided. There was an online professional learning community that teachers engaged in, and the facilitators of the program were in touch with teachers all the time, providing that additional expert support. So it was quite a comprehensive and intensive program for teachers, and certainly from the observational side of things, it looks like that it was affecting change. But keep in mind, this program was designed to impact directly on teachers. It didn't directly involve students. So it was up to the teacher to take that learning and then go and implement it back into the classroom. And teachers were really you know, invited to do this the best way they saw how, you know, the way that would suit their context, you know, and their classroom environment. So the efficacy of what happened beyond the professional learning days was a lot more fluid and dynamic and responsive to the situation, and less well captured. We didn't stand in classrooms to see if teachers were implementing it the way they were taught to implement it. It was very much an organic thing that teachers took the learnings and then they had the option of going and implementing that back in the classroom. So when it came to the evaluation, we were not sure whether we'd see anything at all, particularly around the tight timeline that the evaluation was conducted under. So, you know, it's sort of that three-term period from the first professional learning day through to day 5, where they, you know, were to implement all of those learnings. The control trial occurred by, where are we up to? Jumping back?
Jump back.
Sorry, yep.
Beautiful.
So in terms of the evaluation, we asked a number of research questions. So we wanted to know to what extent the program developed middle school students' achievement above typical learning growth. So in this case, we used the Maths standardised tests that ACR develop and deliver. In South Australia, that's a mandated assessment that's done annually every September. So that data was readily available outside and separate from the program and the evaluation, which was a fantastic opportunity for that sort of standardisation and yeah, not having impact on the program itself. We wanted to see if the program was improving students' math self-efficacy, their cognitive engagement in learning and their metacognition. And we wanted to see if it improved teachers' pedagogical and content knowledge, beliefs about maths teaching and learning, and their professional identity. So the minute you start reading these sorts of research questions, the first thing that it sort of speaks to me about as an evaluator is, right, we have to, how are we going to measure those? You know, in order to be able to answer the research questions, we need to collect information that informs those specific elements of the research questions. So we also knew that we wanted a gold standard evaluation. So next slide, thanks. Which meant a random control trial. That occurred by putting out an expression of interest through the department to all government schools that met, you know, sort of criteria. We were focusing on that middle school group, of course, so it involved primary and secondary schools. 167 schools, which was way more than we needed, volunteered to be a part of the program. Word had got out that it was really effective, so they were keen to join in. We then randomly assigned those schools to an immediate treatment group, so that was 63 schools, and a wait list control group. So even though they were not getting the intervention straight up, they knew that they were going to get it eventually. So no one was missing out. The proportions of placement of schools into control and treatment groups was a practical one, in that there were only so many rounds of implementation that the facilitators could deliver, and basically they had spaces and pay, you know, funding for 120 participants, and so that resulted in 63 schools being included, with 2 teachers roughly from each school attending, and then the rest ended up being in the control group. And the idea with a random control trial is that you have one group that are participating in the program and doing their 5 days of professional development and implementing back in the classroom, and then in the control group you have the other classrooms, business as usual, whatever that looks like. So, you know, but we're just basically assuming that obviously maths is being taught, and they're just doing it the way they normally do it. And the hope is, or, you know, the outcome is that is there a difference in the outcomes of students participating in the intervention group compared to the outcomes participating in the business as usual group. So we also, as I said before, had this Maths test scores. So once the schools had been identified and the teachers had put their hands up, and we knew which classes were participating in both groups, we could then retrospectively go back to the department and say, right, we need the PAT maths scores for the year before, the September 2016 round, to get there, and that became their pre-test as the outcome measure for mathematics achievement. And then the program was delivered, and all business as usual in the other group, and then they all sat their PAT maths tests again in September as the post-test, and so that's how we got those. And at the beginning, before they'd been randomly assigned, and again at the end, there were 2 sets of surveys that were developed. So one was for the teachers and one was for the students, and really the content of those 2 surveys was very specific around collecting information to address those research questions and capture that sort of outcome information that we wanted, but also the process information along the way. So having a look at the results here, you can see under the school level section, that's kind of capturing, there's the program itself, the 5 days of PL, the resources and activities, the professional learning and support, and those middle school teachers attending this program. So we knew in one of those research questions, we wanted to know about whether it impacted their professional identity and self-efficacy, their pedagogical knowledge, and their beliefs about learning mathematics. And so we developed scales that specifically addressed, and then the number of survey items, strongly agree to strongly disagree, that clustered around each of those conceptual areas. And, you bring those items together, and that becomes a sort of a measure of this thing called professional identity and self-efficacy, etc. We also had a series of items that were actually answered by the students around the teaching practices in the classroom. So this is not the teacher saying, oh, I'm teaching this a lot better. This was the student saying and noticing a difference in teaching practice in the classroom. So it was really important that we heard that from the student and not from the teacher. And keep in mind, the teachers, regardless of whether they're in the control group or the treatment group, were all filling out these questions. So these questions were very generic. What are you doing in your maths class and how are you doing it? The students also got to answer some questions about how they felt about maths in terms of their anxiety and their beliefs about their concepts of doing maths, about their cognitive engagement and their metacognition strategies. And then that outcome measure at the end there, that one's the PAT maths scores. So you can see from here, we mapped the results. Once all the data came in and the numbers were crunched, and we compared the intervention group with the control group, we found some significant effect sizes. Not surprisingly, the greatest impact was on the teachers. They were the ones that were directly participating in the program. So if there was going to be any change, that's where we would hope to see it. And you can see that there was a 0.6 effect size of professional identity and self-efficacy of teachers in the intervention group above the teachers in the control group. Likewise, there was a strong impact on pedagogical and content knowledge. So teachers were feeling more confident about their knowledge around maths, and there was actually very little shift in their beliefs about maths. One of the interesting findings there was that basically they had very strong high beliefs already, and so there was a ceiling effect. So basically there wasn't a lot of room for change, or they all held high beliefs about learning mathematics, which was quite interesting to see. And this diagram also sort of presents basically the program logic that underpins all of this. So it was really, what's the theory of change that's happening? The teachers attend the intervention, it affects them and the way they teach, their pedagogy, and what they're doing in the classroom and how they're approaching maths teaching, and then it affects their teaching practice, and that in turn then is thought to change students' outcomes, hopefully with some impact on learning outcomes and academic achievement. So when it came to the students, you can see that the effect sizes are much smaller, as you would expect. Bear in mind that day 5 of the professional learning was 2 weeks to a month before the September data collection. So there was almost no time to implement change from day 5 into the classroom. And a lot of feedback that we had from teachers was that even by the end of it, they said, I'm only just starting to implement this. I'm only just starting to get my head around what we're doing. And we know, change is difficult. So that's completely understandable. So overall, there was a small effect size equivalent to 1 month's learning progress for students, which was, really important and significant given the tight timeline that this happened in. And, one of these opportunities would be lovely to go back and actually let's see where the kids are, a year on or 2 years on in terms of their learning progress, to see if there's a sort of more sustained effect, particularly for those teachers that are, really running with implementing thinking maths in their classroom, and that becoming a much more embedded pedagogy for them, to see if there's even greater impact. But overall, in terms of the learning itself, at the end of the professional development days, we also had teachers filling in feedback forms on the experience of the day, and also having that opportunity to capture more of that process in implementation. So what were they doing back in the classroom? Obviously, with those teachers, it was just the ones in the intervention that were getting to fill in that survey on the 5 occasions, because the business as usual were just doing whatever they were doing. And, it wasn't an easy opportunity to go and ask them to also fill in more surveys. They got to wait their turn and fill it in later. So overall, the evidence was quite compelling that something definitely was going on. One of the real hooks I observed from the work was that teachers adopting that sort of journaling approach, where they were actually starting to write down and document their thinking around maths, instead of just doing the problem, actually writing in the column next to it, or in the margin, what's their thinking, where are they starting with this problem. And these were very open-ended, no direct, clear, they had to find the strategy to solve the problem. So, all of that modelling was happening, and they had the opportunity to participate in it and think about how it was affecting them as the learner in that instance, but also then as that teacher, how would they take that back into the classroom and give that same experience to their students.
Thanks, Catherine. So to summarize, some of the findings is that we have 0.05 for the whole entire intervention, combining all students, primary, secondary. And some of you might have picked up in your comments as well that this is actually, is it a 1 month's growth, Catherine? Here is it?
Yes.
So plus one month's growth.
Yeah, overall.
So overall, there's a plus 1 month's growth. For primary, is plus 2 months growth. And this, if I'm not wrong, they are significant findings?
Yes.
Yes. So it's really, what we're finding out is that the primary schools are much better placed in having this intervention in their schools as compared to secondary schools. And to just integrate back to why, this is actually relevant for today's presentation is because we may not be able to buy the program because it's a South Australian Department's program. You might be in different states, but really there are a lot of learnings from this program that we can take on. And I mean, positive, and also some gaps that South Australia Department themselves are trying to refine as it is now, learning from this. So secondary school structures are much more difficult to implement metacognition because, and I'm actually secondary school teachers out there, you might want to put in the chat box some of the challenges as well. Primary schools are less structured in their curriculum, so teachers can spend more time to stretch students' thinking in the classroom, to spend more time on a task or to understand a problem rather than trying to go through quickly. And research has shown that metacognition is not so useful in years, especially got to do with the final years, because that's where people are anxious, students are anxious, teachers are anxious, they just want to get through the program. There's no engagement, no motivation to do that. So it's much better to grow that kind of metacognitive thinking in the lower years. But that doesn't mean that it's not important in secondary. It is really important as well to have that. And it's about how we do it. And I think one of you commented in the chat box as well that this is a kind of a student teacher intervention rather than a student intervention. I think it's both, because when we want to capture student in outcomes at the end of the day, we need to consider all types of things that come into play. And it's a kind of a trajectory, a kind of a theory of change, as Catherine has said. So we need to think about, in your school, whole school change, how you incorporate teachers to learn metacognitive strategy before just going to implementing a metacognitive strategy. Have professional conversations about how that can take place, and take on Thinking Maths as an example, because they have really good modeling practices. The facilitator of that program was an expert facilitator. She has been teaching for over 20 years. She was able to model a lot of these practices, and teachers just take on that, go back to the classroom and just translate that, and remembering how she did it, and just noting down in the journals the questions that she asked, and doing that. I think it's really useful for every school to have a champion in that sense, of someone who is a mentor, who can coach lower experienced teachers or younger teachers and who are less experienced in the classroom to do that better. And also the other kind of positive things that come up from the programs are really good documentation and resources that help teachers to just take it on and go back to the classroom, have more at the schools, and have more conversation about how that can be implemented in their context. Journaling their thinking, that's what Catherine said, not just students journaling their thinking, but teachers have their own journals as well, to talk about what went well for them and what would they implement tomorrow in the classroom, and then bring it back to the PL sessions where they talk about it in groups, and what, about the successes and the gaps as well. If we go on to the next slide. So I think we can skip this one. Yeah, Catherine, you want to talk a bit about this before we go on, because it's just really what we have already mentioned.
And I just also wanted to suggest that what was also clear is that while this was in a maths context, and the program's called Thinking Maths, what was actually being modelled and taught and demonstrated was just good teaching pedagogy. You could actually apply it to any curriculum area you liked. It wasn't specifically for maths in that respect. Also in the primary setting, obviously these kids in the classrooms got to have that teacher for most of the day, 5 days a week. So those teachers, participating in Thinking Maths and then going back and implementing it in the classroom, the students were getting more opportunity to have that type of learning, because that teacher was transferring it into the other subjects. The questioning skills, good questioning skills, you can use that in any subject area. So they actually got a higher dosage, so to speak, in terms of exposure to teachers' improved pedagogical practices. Whereas in secondary schools, we know that the students might have the teacher for 3 hours or 5 hours, whatever it is a week for maths, and so they weren't getting that level of exposure to the program either. And I think teachers were in secondary were feeling a little bit more confronted by the change of approach that was more, dare I say it, primary school typical sort of pedagogical approach. And so I think there was some of that element where there was less confidence about they were more risk taking, trying different things, and some of that might have come through on the students, and that's why there's some reasons why there might be those negative outcomes or not so positive outcomes for secondary. And what we're doing now actually is going back and having a look at that secondary cohort data to really dig down deeply to find out. Obviously there were still groups in there that did implement and have positive outcomes for their students, but to better understand what were the challenges for teachers that didn't achieve those same sort of outcomes.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. So we have about 2 more minutes to go. So really quickly up, how do we actually embed metacognition in the classroom? And some of you might just, we will actually send through some of the slides as well, so you could actually digest it in your own time. But before a lesson, we want to create some questions about the content before starting classes. During the lesson, have students work in pairs, and then at the end of the lesson, making connections about what they're learning. And I really like the idea of having some of these tools, and I'm sure we have all used it. I think pair share or cognitive organizers, mind maps and things like that to evaluate the thinking along the way, thinking journals and evaluating sources in the use of debates, discussion groups, and just encouraging students to talk through some of these questions as they go along their progress, along their task. And so some of these questions here are really prompting students to engage in the process of learning. So why are we studying this? Why is this topic important? It's so critical for them to get interested in the topic before we actually start jumping into a whole new content area. And what you already know about it, getting students to talk about and relating what they have previously studied, and during the engagement of the topic to pose questions about what they feel confused about. And I always love in my English class, when I was a teacher as well in English, to have debates as well. And just to talk about, you know, presenting different propositions about what this text really means to them, and having that different opposing views about different things, and coming to a view about it at the end of the day.
Definitely, which is useful across all subjects.
Absolutely.
Lovely. We'll speed through this, but they'll all be available to you at the end of this. We just don't want to take up more of your precious time. That's our details if you want to reach out to us for anything. And thank you for your time tonight, and thanks especially for our guest presenter from ACER. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you for having me.
Catherine.
Thanks, Dr. Catherine Dix, for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your expertise and bringing the results of thinking maths to life. So thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for dedicating your time on a Tuesday night to learning more about metacognition. And if you have any questions, just flick them through to us, and have a good rest of day. All right, take care. Bye.